Hi, welcome back to Learnovative Agile and Scrum video series. My name is Vijay Bandaru. I'm a certified Scrum trainer, certified enterprise coach, and certified team coach from Scrum Alliance. We create these videos to help you understand the Scrum concepts easily so that you can implement them in your projects and products. In this video, we are going to discuss about sprint. What is a sprint? What are the characteristics of the sprint? What are the time boxes of the sprint? And within the sprint, what are the events? These things we are going to cover. Sprint is a fixed unit of time. We can consider the sprint is like a heartbeat of Scrum. The reason, within the sprint, there are 4 events: sprint planning, daily Scrum, review, retrospective. So these are contained within the sprint. That is why sprint is called as a container event. So it's a fixed unit of time. According to Scrum, a usual recommended length of the sprint is less than or equal to 1 month, because it helps you to create frequent feedback from customers and early delivery of the value. Cost of change can be under control. Transparency can be maintained. Because of these reasons, less than or equal to 1 month. And the purpose of these sprints is to convert ideas into incremental value to the customers. And taking the fixed unit of time within less than or equal to 1 month, and within that first day planning, everyday daily Scrum, last day review, retrospective, again taking the same fixed unit of time, doing that planning, daily Scrum, review, retrospective, it creates a kind of rhythm like heartbeat. That is why sprints are like heartbeat of Scrum. Now, who decides the sprint duration? The Scrum team collaboratively decides the sprint duration. So all the people in the Scrum team, in the earlier video, we discussed about Scrum team. If you have not watched it, please watch it. A product owner, Scrum Master, and a group of cross-functional developers within less than or equal to 10, the Scrum team. So they will collaboratively decide the sprint duration before starting the sprinting. So the Scrum Master will help to facilitate the discussion. So how do they decide? There is a thumb rule they follow. Short enough to get the feedback, long enough to create the value. This is the thumb rule, which means the shorter duration, which is required to get the feedback for the work the Scrum team is doing, and the longer duration, which is required to create value because of the work that is getting done in the sprint. Wherever the short and long duration are coinciding, that will be the suitable sprint length. So how do they do that? They bring some parameters for the discussion. For example, from developer side, there will be some parameters they will bring. Number of developers in the team, their skill set, their experience. For example, there are 5 developers in the team. They need 7 skills. Skill means, for example, Java programming is a skill. UI development is a skill. Database programming is a skill. Automation is a skill. Documentation is a skill. So there are 5 people, but they need 7 skills, and everybody is a college graduate. Versus there are 7 developers, they need skills, 6 skills they have, and everybody is experienced. Let's say average experience of the developers is 6 years. So in the first scenario, they may go for a little longer sprint, whereas the second scenario, they may go for a little shorter sprint. Compared to the previous scenario, second scenario, they may go for shorter sprint because people are experienced and they have skills and they have enough people like that. Similarly, the product owner also will bring some parameters for discussion. The first parameter is overall complexity of the product. For example, you are creating a finance product where there are a lot of permutations and combinations, a lot of complexity, complex formulas are involved. So many dependencies are there in the requirements. So overall, the product is complex. In that case, it is better to take a shorter sprint because you'll get a regular, frequent opportunities to get feedback so that it will avoid late and costly failures. So shorter sprint. Frequency of feedback. Usually the stakeholders, customers and users will give the feedback. So what is their availability, the convenient availability to attend the sprint review, to give feedback on the increments. Stability of the requirement, third parameter. The kind of market in which your product is operated, the kind of competitors your product is competing with. If the requirements are rapidly changing, then it is better to suggested to have shorter sprint, because it will help you to have flexibility in changing the requirements. For example, if you are working in a 1 month sprint, let's say 1 month sprint you take, then there will be 20 days, 22 working days. Let's say on day 3, you have received a requirement change. You have to customers to wait another 17 days so that your change will be done in the next sprint. Compared to that, if you are working on a 1 week sprint, there will be 5 days. So let's say you get a change on day 2. You can tell your customers, wait for 3 days, your change will be done. In the second scenario, customer will be happy because he just needs to wait 3 days to get the change. So if the requirements are not very stable, very volatile, rapidly changing, better to go for shorter sprints, so that flexibility of managing the scope changes is easy. The fourth parameter coming from product owner is overall duration of the product or project or release you are doing. For example, your overall high-level estimated project duration is 6 months. In that case, you can have 6 sprints with 1 month each sprint duration. Whereas if your overall duration itself is 2 months, and if you plan to have only 2 sprints with each sprint 1 month duration, it's not a good idea, because less number of inspect and adapt opportunities will decrease the transparency, increase the complexity, thereby risk of failure may increase day by day. So depending upon the duration also, you can see what is a suitable sprint length. They also consider some organizational parameters like management decisions, organizational constraints, which include approval constraints, process constraints, infrastructural constraints, and any other process constraints related. So what is the role of a Scrum Master in deciding the sprint length? So the first thing is, Scrum Master will facilitate a meeting between product owner, all the developers and Scrum Master to help them exploring all these parameters and help them to come up with the consensus-based sprint duration, which means all the developers and the product owner and Scrum Master should agree for one sprint duration, which is not more than 1 month. That means less than or equal to 1 month. That is how the sprint length can be decided by the Scrum team collaboratively through a discussion facilitated by a Scrum Master. Now let's imagine there is a team. They have decided that 2 weeks is the short enough to get the feedback and 2 weeks is the long enough to create value. So they started sprinting. First sprint successfully completed with 2 weeks. They changed the second sprint 1 week, third sprint 4 weeks, fourth sprint again 2 weeks, fifth sprint 3 weeks, like that they are doing. This is not a very good approach. The reason is because of different units of these times will create inconsistency. That is the reason Scrum recommends fixed length of less than or equal to 1 month durations will help you to create consistency. So what? That consistency leads to predictability over a period of time. So that is why Scrum recommends fixed length sprints. It doesn't mean that once a sprint length is decided like a 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it should not be changed for lifetime. No, it's not like that. As long as the rhythm, regularity, consistency, predictability are maintained, time to time, if it is required, you can change the sprint length. For example, in my experience, when I was working with a project, initially based on the parameters we just discussed, the Scrum team decided to have a 4-week sprint. After 3 months of time, The product owner and developers have decided instead of 4 weeks, if you go to 2 weeks, more customer interactions will be coming and more frequent feedback is coming, and time to market can be more effectively utilized. Then they are okay to change it. So they changed from 4 weeks to 2 weeks and they continued another 3 to 4 months. Like that, as and when it is required to change the sprint length without impacting the consistency and predictability and the rhythm regularity negatively, it's okay to change. After all, Scrum is all about inspect and adapt. To become better, inspect and adapt. But changing the sprint length every sprint is not a good idea. Now, another important characteristic is no gap between sprints. When a sprint is completed, immediately next sprint starts. The reason is it will maintain the momentum, just like a marathon runner. They adjust the speed and then they run marathon continuously. So to maintain the sustainable pace, which is again principle number 8 in the Agile Manifesto, no gap between sprints. When a sprint ends, next working day, the next sprint starts. And Scrum allows to cancel a sprint under some special circumstances. First of all, what is sprint cancellation? Abnormal termination of the sprint before time box expires is called as sprint cancellation. So for example, your sprint is 2 weeks and it starts on day 1 and ends by day 10. So if you close the sprint abruptly before reaching the last working day, then that is called as sprint cancellation. So only the product owner has the authority to cancel a sprint. So you can say that it's a right of the product owner. When a sprint has to be cancelled, the decision has to be made by the product owner. What could be the possible reason for cancelling a sprint? A sprint may be cancelled when the sprint goal becomes obsolete. That means whatever value you want to achieve by the end of the sprint, which you have decided during the sprint planning, if that value becomes obsolete, that means zero, no longer valuable because of market changes or requirement changes or technology changes, infrastructure changes, or any other reasons. If that goal becomes obsolete, Scrum allows you to cancel the sprint. When a sprint is cancelled, what happens then? A new sprint begins with a new sprint goal and new product backlog items. But in the current sprint backlog, if any individual items hold some value, individual value, then you can quickly have a sprint review. And recommended to have sprint retrospective also because it helps you to understand what are the possible reasons behind the cancellation of the sprint so that future sprint cancellations can be effectively addressed. And please note, sprint cancellation is like engagement cancellation. It doesn't happen every now and then. So under special circumstances, Scrum allows you to cancel a sprint. So this is in line with one of the Agile Manifesto values, responding to change over following a plan. So if the sprint durations are shorter, you can avoid this cancellation needs. Comparing a 4 weeks sprint or a 1 month sprint with a 1 week sprint, you may have a need of canceling a sprint for a 1 month sprint because of the longer duration. But there is a very rare opportunity required to cancel a sprint in the shorter sprints. So recommended to have shorter sprints so that it will be easy to have flexibility in managing the scope changes. Early time to market can be effectively addressed, and the customers can also be interacted more frequently. Customers can be involved, and risks can be addressed effectively, and value can be delivered iteratively and incrementally. So these are the advantages of shorter sprints. Now, what is the best day to start a sprint between Monday and Friday? So according to Scrum, there is no recommendation or insisting to start on Monday or Wednesday or Friday or something like that. But according to my experience working on different various products using Scrum, if you start a sprint on Monday, usually if it is a weekly sprint, either 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the Friday, if it is a weekly sprint, the same week Friday. If it is a 2 week sprint, the next week Friday, will be the review and retrospective. So usually people leave office early on Friday to catch up the weekend work. So the participation of the people in the sprint review and retrospective will be less, which will make the review and retrospective less effective. That is why I wouldn't recommend to start a sprint on Monday. Similarly, if you start a sprint on Friday, same reason, people may take off personal time off, or and next reason is there's a weekend coming up immediately. If you start a sprint on Friday, immediately weekend is coming. So Monday, when developers come back to office, they may say that, oh, we forgot all the things due to the weekend gap, what we discussed and what we planned on Friday. So let's have a catch-up meeting, 2 to 3 hours of waste of time. So that is why in my opinion, any midweek like Wednesday or Thursday is a good idea to start a sprint, so that more availability will be there for people, and participation will be more, so that the events will become more effective. So that is why whatever is convenient for you to start the sprint, it is okay. Now coming to the time boxes of the sprint. As we discussed earlier also, Scrum has 5 events. Sprint is a container event, which consists of first day planning, which is the second event, everyday daily Scrum, which is the third event, last day review, fourth event, followed by retrospective, fifth event. So the 4 events, sprint planning, daily Scrum, review, retrospective, are contained within the sprint. That is why sprint is called as a container event. And according to Scrum, the recommended sprint length for sprint is not more than 1 month, which means less than or equal to 1 month. Similarly, Scrum also has got some recommendations for the remaining events inside the sprint. So sprint planning time box according to Scrum is maximum 8 hours for 1 month sprint. And shorter for shorter sprints. That means less than 8 hours for less than 1 month sprints. Sprint review time box according to Scrum is maximum 4 hours for 1 month sprint. And shorter for shorter sprint. That means less than 4 hours for less than 1 month sprint. Now coming to the retrospective. Retrospective time box according to Scrum is maximum 3 hours for 1 month sprint. Shorter for shorter sprints, which means less than 3 hours for less than 1 month sprints. Now coming to the daily Scrum. Daily Scrum is 15 minutes irrespective of, that means for any sprint length, and number of developers in the Scrum team. That means if your sprint is 1 month long, you can pretty much reserve the first working day is for the planning purpose, because 8 hours means 1 day. So first day can be reserved for planning purpose. Last day can be reserved for review and retrospective back to back, because review maximum 4 hours for 1 month sprint, retrospective maximum 3 hours for 1 month sprint. So 3 plus 4 almost 7 hours means, which is 1 day. Last day back to back review and retrospective. The remaining working days are for implementation or execution or development, whatever you call, to implement the selected items into the sprint backlog. During this period, 15 minutes of daily scrum, irrespective of sprint length, which means whether it is a 1 week sprint or less than 1 week sprint or 2 week sprint or 1 month sprint or 3 week sprint, or number of developers, whether you have a 3 developers or 8 developers or 7 developers, the daily scrum is 15 minutes. Somewhere in between, the scrum team will do the product backlog refinement to understand the upcoming items in the product backlog, most probably the next sprint target items, probable planned items for next sprint. They will understand the clarifications and acceptance criteria, dependencies, all these things, and then estimate and then keep them ready. So that is how a sprint will work in Scrum framework. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you have liked the video, please subscribe, like, and share the video. And in case you want any public or private Agile and Scrum safe related training inquiries, please contact the below contact information. Thank you so much and have a nice time.